way we approach this is in our March 2024 Vision Values Land Use Planning Workshop. We ask people to sit around these tables looking at maps of Carrabassett Valley and really think about some of these key questions. Where does the community gather? Where do they run into each other? Is there something that you wish the town had that it doesn't have now? I remember I heard car wash several times, in addition to other things. Where are the places that need to be protected from the impacts of change or growth? Where are the places to focus new investment or beneficial change? And where could change or growth occur in a way that benefits the town? And so these pictures just show people kind of working on those ideas, and then we had an exercise where people answered a series of questions. I'm assuming many of you were in attendance for this, but in case you weren't, and this one here just says, what is the one thing the community could do to make Carrabassett Valley a better place? And a lot of that information is what informs sort of the future land use goals and strategies. So some of the goals for future land use include opportunities for those who want to live in and promote businesses in Carrabassett Valley. Protected spaces for present and future recreational opportunities, recognizing the importance of recreation and the recreational economy here. Efficient and effective permitting procedures, especially in the growth area. And then some of the actions include considering policy decisions that could create additional diversity in housing opportunities to address housing shortages. Those are just some examples of the future land use goals and actions. And then where are there areas that need to be sort of either expanded or contracted? And this is the map, the growth areas map, that is being proposed in the comprehensive plan. So what you can see in the purple, inside the purple, is what's being proposed as the growth area. And what that really means is like, that's where we're comfortable with additional growth. It doesn't mean that it's high density across the board or that it's all necessarily to be developed. And one thing I'll note is that it's not that significantly different from the existing growth area, except for a few places that were added in and a few places that were removed. So you can see the hatched purple lines represent the areas that were added into the growth area, and then the cross-hatched orange are the areas that were are in the growth area now that are being proposed to be removed. This is not a zoning map, right? So the idea is that this lays the foundation for any future zoning changes that would occur about this. But this is the proposed future land use map with the growth area, and then these dots on the map are what we're calling these areas for future study. So when we did that exercise where everyone looked at the maps and talked about their ideas, especially about things they hope to see in the future or would love to have, these are areas that we heard people talking about quite a bit that currently play different roles or could in the future be areas that play a role in Carrabassett Valley. But based on sort of what's the emphasis in that area. So a couple of these are places that are already natural kind of community gathering places. And the idea is that the plan recommends that they continue to be invested in as community gathering spaces. A couple of them are identified because they could potentially be a new mixed-use village site. So we heard a lot of discussion around the idea of space for additional community services, particularly health-related services. So could these areas be considered for those types of uses? And then over near the town park and office and the airport, looking and also at the library and AGC, looking at circulation improvements that could make it easier to manage all the different things that are happening And this is really the time when we're eager to hear from you. Noel has volunteered to make notes on the flip chart. He's really good at it.
At that stage where you say revisions as needed based on the state of Maine feedback.
Yeah, so
How powerful is that?
yeah, so sometimes what we often hear from them is it goes in front of all of the state agencies, they review it. We follow a checklist of requirements, and so typically we prepare an A+ plan. But oftentimes we hear from the Beginning with Habitat program, and I'm not trying to diminish any of these comments, but they want you to be highly specific about a certain species or something that we might have missed in our inventory, and that's like a quick edit change where we can, add that into the natural resources section, for example. But they'll prepare essentially a document that says, great job. Either nothing needs to be changed or you need to add this like 1 or 2 elements or the wording, which would be reviewed with the committee and the town in order to call it done.
Keep mentioning state approvals, and I wonder if we've gone down this road for a long time. We've just contracted, I shouldn't say contract, it looks like we do have the land we need to build some housing up on Big Old Hill, which is a perfect spot. And can the state look at that and go, no, we disagree?
I think they'd have to justify their reasoning for it. I mean, they can say whatever they want, but they need to, just like a planning board finding a fact, they need to justify it. So if all of a sudden we were going to envelope a huge area that was all, one of the things IF&W has wading bird habitat and special wetlands and all this stuff, and if all of a sudden we were going to say that we wanted to include a giant swampy complex in our growth area map, I could see that the state agencies, IF&W or the natural areas would say, hey, this doesn't make sense, you need to do this. So as much as Augusta, between the legislature and everything else, passes new rules the last couple of years that keep stuffing things down the town's throat, what we have to do, I don't see that in good standing that they can tell us, no, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I think if you look, I was just looking through the back of the existing plan, and there's strikeouts and additions based on what the state's comments were for the 2003-2004 plan, and a lot of it is clerical text, or there's one spot where it says the town projects their census to be 810, and for whatever reason the state made us strike that out. They didn't want us to put a projection number in there, which is kind of, the other thing I'll say is a lot of state agencies are underfunded, so I don't imagine that there's a whole surplus of people that are going to nitpick for months and months and months, because and I don't know, they've got is there a turnaround time that they get?
I don't think they promise a turnaround time. They do have more staff now reviewing comprehensive plans, but we do look at the growth area and the future land use map against the critical natural resources area. So, that is taken into consideration, and they would have to have, a justification.
You guys have had a comp plan in place since 2003. That's the one that we're working on, but there's ones before that.
1983 one that isn't hugely different from
and so the premise is, this is an update to your existing plan, and we're really kind of just, the growth area is sort of tweaking around the edges, and it is informed by things like the critical resources and recreational resources and conservation lands and stuff like that. And so I think you're in a pretty good position to be able to justify, here's why we're doing this or that. But typically, it's much more like, hey, we worked with a town that wanted to do, in your comprehensive plan, it also asks you to think about implementation. So there's short-term goals and medium-term goals or long-term goals, and the town that we were working with wanted to say, can we just say here's the goals that we want to do now, and then every other goal is a goal that we're going to get to at some point, which actually makes a heck of a lot of sense, because you really want to focus on what's important, and then everything else is kind of opportunity, if you will. But you don't want to lose all these great ideas. But the state came back and said, you actually need to just do a chart that really organizes those in short, medium-term, and long-term goals. But it didn't actually get into the substance of the goals.